Alright, so now we want to continue with the floor. We do have those planks already modeled and the UVs are perfect for our texture we got from Fab. And now what you want to do is we go to File. So I will just translate here in real time because yeah, it's all German, but I will just tell you basically what to do. So you go to File here and let's just go Open. And no, sorry for that. We actually go to File and then New. This is what we want to do. And as for the resolution you have here, 1024, and this is just for preview purposes. So for our session or during our session, we want to make sure that we do have a nice resolution here. So 4K is fine, DirectX is also fine. Just in case if you're wondering about OpenGL and DirectX, we just want to make sure that we keep this DirectX because also Unreal Engine is using the DirectX for the normal map. If you're using OpenGL, this just means that if you have normal maps exporting this from OpenGL, that you might just need to flip the green channel, and we don't really need to do it, so we can just keep this as it is, DirectX, and this will complement Unreal Engine 5 perfectly. So let's go to File here, let's go and choose the Floor Mesh, Floor FBX, and let's just open this one. And then you can click OK. So pretty simple, pretty low poly. And by default, the lighting is pretty ugly. So if you hold Shift and the right mouse button, you can basically rotate your cube map, I should say, or the HDRI, I should say. So this means we can change the lighting. This is pretty important, especially later when we use roughness values. This is really important. So we should go to this top icon here on the right hand side, and let's do from panorama, let's switch this to in this case I want to go for something like the Studio White Umbrella, which is still pretty bright. Let's do, so what we want to do for the cube map here, or for your HDRI map, let's keep it really clean. So you might just want to do the Studio White Umbrella here. And so you can see the lighting once we hold the Shift button and right mouse button. So let's just keep it like so. So we do have also some light here, because when you look at the reference, we do have the lamp on top. Okay, so basically the lamp is here in the center. So we do have some fairly soft lighting, not really directional light. So what you can do, we just keep it and we can just reduce the EV here. Just reduce this overall just a tiny bit. And then let's do shadows. And as for the shadows, you can set this to a higher quality. So instead of lightweight, we should do maybe intense. And then let's decrease the shadow. Let's do 78 maybe. And then when you click on the next icon here on the right hand side, you can also do the lighting quality here, and let's do high. Yeah, let's do like so. Okay, and then you should be good to go for the start. So let me just find a nice spot here. Maybe something like this. Okay. So the next thing we should do, we should start and bake. The reason why we want to bake is because we want to have some ambient occlusion information and curvature and all that stuff to make things more interesting. So we can have creases in between here, and yeah, we can do some nice things. So let's go to Mode, and then Baking of the Mesh Maps. And then you see Normal with Space Normal ID. You can just disable ID, we don't need that. And I think the rest we can just keep. Let's do the size here and put this from 1K to 4K. We can enable diffusion. And this is pretty important because we don't really use a low poly mesh. It's also not really a high poly mesh. No, it's still low poly. So we just want to enable this one. So low poly mesh as high poly mesh. We want to bake this. And then you don't really need a cage for that. And anti-aliasing, we put this to super sampling. Let's do 64. It's fairly high. You can also just use 16, but let's just 64 just for the sake of it. And then let's do baking mesh maps. So you can see he's now baking the normal. So for the curvature, you can see here, it's a little bit just like the ambient occlusion, but it's still a major difference here. Ambient occlusion is using contact, it is faking contact shadows. So when meshes are close together, he's basically giving you this fake shadow in between those spots. But as for the curvature is basically calculating the bevel or those edges or beveled edges. So we can get also like really nice edge damage on those outer parts of those planks. This is basically the reason why we are baking mesh maps, especially for ambient occlusion and curvature. Those two are really necessary. So after the baking process, you can just go back to your paint mode. Don't mind this red text here, I was just trying out things, so it's perfectly fine, you're not gonna have this. So just go back to your paint mode here, and then when you go to texture settings on the right hand side, you're gonna see all those baked mesh maps, and this is what you need. Let's go back to the layers here, and let me just click on this layer 1 and delete this, because I don't need that for now. Let's assign first those textures we have from Fab. So go to File, and then let's do Resource Import. Let's add resources. And what we want to add is legacy textures. We want to add the ambient occlusion, the base color, the bump we can use, and normal and roughness. So let's just get those things. And you can just click on the first one, shift click the last one, and we can put this all into the so-called texture category. So everything is inside the texture category. And resource import, we just want to have this for the current session, and then import. Okay, cool. So now you have those things here. Just in case, if you delete this later on, you're not gonna find your textures here. In this case, it's called wooden floor, and then you can find it later. If you just wanna reassign those textures, feel free to do that. Okay. So now what we can do is we create, when you click on this bucket, we want to create a fill layer here. Let me just click on this because I don't want to autosave actually. And we call this one wood base. So this is our bucket, our fill layer. And when you scroll down here, or let me just make this a little bigger here, you can see we do have a color channel, high channel, roughness, metal, and normal. We don't need metal because it's only wood, so metal doesn't make any sense at all. What we need is, we need the base color. So when you hover over this, you can see this is the base color. You can just drag this one inside here. You can see it's already aligned. And then let's get the bump. So we put this into the high channel. And it looks pretty ugly. We're gonna fix this, no worries. And you can also get the normal, put this into the normal channel here. And actually, I don't really need the bump. I think normal is fine. Let me just delete the normal. Let me just see how this is gonna look. Yeah, I think only the normal is fine. We don't really need the bump. And you can see it looks pretty wet. It's because our roughness is pretty low here. So just get this dark texture here. It's the roughness. And we put this into the roughness channel. So now you can see it's still pretty wet. Okay. And the reason why that is because you need to understand, as for roughness textures, the darker the roughness texture is, or the darker the values, the more reflection you're going to have. So this is basically, if you really have something really dark or almost black, it's going to function basically like a wet surface or like a puddle. But if this is like a brighter value, you're going to have less reflections. And this is what we want to have, because this is not really correct. You can see here, it's pretty soft, also the lighting, and we don't really have those strong reflections. So this is what we want to need, and this is what we want to have. So when we go on to the roughness channel here, just switch from base color to roughness. Then you can just decrease this. This is just one way to do that, but actually, let me just go back to base color, okay? What you also can do is right click. Let's do a levels, so-called levels. And you can choose the roughness here. Instead of base color, just switch this to roughness. And then you can also just decrease the middle cursor here and make this pretty soft in terms of reflection. So maybe just a tiny bit here, and let me see. It always depends on the light, like I said. So we do have like a soft light on the ceiling, So I believe we should have something. This is way too strong, so we should have something like this. On the top right hand side here, you can see material. You can always switch to roughness channel. Now you can see it should be something like this. You can see we do have some nice variations here around those knots, which is less reflective. But here you do have some gray values, and this is perfectly fine. And then always make sure that you shift right click and just toggle or just spin the cube map here to see basically how your wood is reflecting. So I believe you don't really need a lot of reflection, so let me just decrease this like so. So now you can see you got rid of this problem here. Now, next thing we should have is we should adjust those colors, because you can see we do have some really dark brown spots. It's almost black. And then we do have those reddish, brownish things here, those highlights around those knots, especially. So this is something we need to recreate. What we could do is we click on this wood base, right click. Sorry for that, let me just disable this one. Right click on the wood base again, and let's do a filter. We click on this filter, and let's do a color correction. So for shadows, feel free to open this one up. And we could do a little more. You can see we get some more saturation, and it's getting a little darker, so this is pretty important, as you can see here. But we shouldn't go too crazy. Maybe just a tiny bit. Luminosity. Let's decrease this also, just a tiny bit. And let's try a little more saturation, but I believe we should go for a little less saturation, to be honest. And a little more contrast. Like so. Midtones. We should decrease a little bit, luminosity. Let's bump this one up a little bit. And also we want to do a little more saturation. So shadows and midtones, I think this is something you should have. Okay, let me just fix the luminosity so a little less. The autosave is driving me nuts. And maybe not so much for the contrast. Something like this. And then what we could do next is we get another layer here, and we call this one darken. Let's set this to multiply. And now what we could do, only the color here, so only activate the color channel. So you can click everything else to just disable this. As for the base color, let's do some brown, red, and maybe something like this. And then for the multiply here, you can just decrease this effect. And just introduce a little more. Just a tiny bit. So now you can see the difference here. It's a little darker, we have a little more saturation. So next thing we should do is, now we do have some color correction at least, and we also have a separate channel just to darken it a little bit and just to get this reddish tone also just a little bit. This is something we can do. So let's just make this a little brighter, more saturated, and then maybe a little more multiply here. But don't go too crazy. Maybe, 50 is enough. So, but the color correction is not really ideal yet. What we should do next thing, we should maybe add another channel here, so another bucket, the layer, and we call this one color variation, maybe something like this. And let's only focus on color. So we want to disable everything here, except roughness. Let's put the roughness to something like 0.8. And for the base color, we put this maybe to something like, let's see, like this yellow reddish tint. So maybe this one. Yeah, maybe this one here as a base. Now what we can do is let's delete this filter here, and we can go to the textures here, texture symbol here. And then when you scroll down, let me make this a little bigger. When we scroll down, you can see down here different grunge textures. So why don't we just find a nice grunge texture? So let me see if I just focus on those brighter spots here, those orange brighter spots. We should maybe get something like a directional grunge, maybe something like this. And we can just put this into the mask here. So now we can see this is not really correct yet. So what we should do, we could invert this if we want to. Let me see, invert. So it doesn't really matter. I will just keep it like it is by default. Let me just put this down a little bit. So this is just too much. And also the color is maybe a little too bright. So what I want to do is I just go back to the color here, base color. And I will just make this a little darker also. And maybe less saturation. Maybe something like this. Sorry for this. Maybe something like this. Or we can just click here. Let me just click on this pen. Oh, sorry for that. Let me just put this on my second monitor here. So I click on this pen, and then I click on one of those highlights here. And it's still a little dark, so we should make this like so, and a little more red. So maybe something like that. Okay, but you can see the grunge map is not really convincing. So let's click on the mask here, click on this grunge map. And what I want to do is let's disable the lock here. And then you can hold shift on this repetition. Oh, it's not really the repetition, it's the scale of your U and V. So let me just hold shift and increase this until I get a nice effect I really want. So yeah, let me just maybe put this to 4, and then let me just decrease the other value here, just to give this a little more stretch, just a little bit. So 1 by default is fine. And then you can play with the balance. So if you just do more balance, you can see that you introduce more, but if you just decrease the balance, so this is actually something we want to have. Something like this. And then you can increase the contrast. And now this is much more convincing for wood, you can see now. This is actually something we really want to have. And then what you also could do is, if you want, you click on this color variation on this sphere here. You activate the height channel and you can reduce the height just a tiny bit. Here, just a tiny bit, if you want to have this nice effect. But you need to be really careful. Otherwise, it's going to look too sharp. It's going to look really noisy, and this is something you really want to avoid. So let me go back to the grunge map here on the mask, and let me play around a little more. Maybe the contrast is a little too much. So yeah, maybe something like this. And if you want to, you can introduce another grunge map. So maybe also something like some kind of directional effect maybe. So why don't we just get this grunge map here and put this on top or between, so between color variation and above the grunge map here. And set this to multiply, pretty important. And then you could disable the lock, and let's just increase this. But what you need to do is you should rotate this, in this case, the grunge map we have here, the second one. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. So this is more directional now, because you can see this is vertical, but we want to have this directional. And then, actually, let me put this back to 0. Yeah, sorry for that. It's vertically, this autosave is driving me really nuts, to be honest. It's a little weird because, yeah, you can see it's vertical here, but once we align it and we don't change the rotation, it's basically the same direction. According to our planks. It's a little weird, but now it is fine. And what you can see now, the difference is when you add another grunge with a multiply on top, you can see that you get this nice fibers also, like more variations. So you're basically hiding more. So you can see without, it's just a flat bright color here, but once you add this on top, you do have this nice variation here. Let's do 5. And here we shouldn't stretch this like too much. Okay, so we should have some distortion. Still a directional effect, but we still should have some distortion, you can see. So nice waves also. So maybe 3. Let's do 2. 2 is perfect, I believe. And still, if you're not really satisfied, you can always go back to your first grunge and increase the balance. Or decrease until you're satisfied, and then play with the contrast. In this case, I just want to have this a little more. Like so. And then the grunge map here, you can also just play with the balance. And contrast is pretty important. But don't go too crazy, because otherwise it's gonna look pretty sharp. And on top of that, just right click here and get a levels. And then you can also just sharpen it. So the levels is also pretty important on top of that. Or just make it softer overall, maybe. Yeah, something like this. And then let's check the reference here. But you can see those color variations here, they are more dependent on several, like, those things are more like on individual planks, the brighter color here. So we can also just try to make this. So in order to have that, let me see. We can just darken it a little bit. Yeah, let's go for something like this. And then what we could do is we get another layer here. Let's call this one blank variation. So this is quite similar to what we did before, but in this case, I want to get this effect more on individual planks. So why don't we just get the grunge dust streak and we put this into the mask. Let's do rotation 90. I think this is a little better. And then let's do the repetition here a little less. But don't go too crazy here. Yeah, we should have less. And what we can do now is we could actually, so now let's just keep it white. We could on top of that just get a paint layer, just right click on this grunge dust streak here and add a paint layer. And then press X. And then you could actually hide some of those things, for example. But you can see it looks pretty weird. So instead, let me just Control Z. Instead of that, let me just go here to the brush. And we do a different brush. Let's do a bark. Where is bark? It's on top here, the bark one. And then you could do paint this away. So just paint this away on most of those things. So what I want is, I don't really want to have this here. And this one, maybe we can just paint this away. So I only want to have like some spots. So this is something I want. This plank maybe, this is something I don't really want. And just paint this away. And I really don't need this, just to get more variations here. Also here, I don't really need this. And don't worry, we're gonna fix this stuff here because it's overall it's pretty bright. Now we have like dark spots and we're gonna fix this later. So just make sure that you paint, that you leave spots and some you just want to remove. Okay, then what you could do, this one doesn't really look good, so let me just remove this. Yeah, this one I want to remove. The next thing you could do is you get a level 0 also on top, and now you can sharpen it. So this is how you can basically now get rid of those things. So it depends. On what you want to achieve, basically. But yeah, this is much more settled. So yeah, this looks more convincing. And let me see. Yeah. On top of that, we might just want to do another directional grunge. So why don't we just go for this grunge map 005, put this on top. And let's put this guy to 5. Let's disable the lock. Let's try to make this more reasonable for us. maybe something like this. And then set this to multiply. Just to have this like fiber effect being introduced a little more. Maybe this is too much stretch, so I believe this is better. And then please do balance here. Less contrast. Let's go back to the levels here. And then what we could do, finally, we could use a nice color here. So roughness should be fairly high, 0.8. And for the base color, let's go for something orange. Something like this maybe. Yeah. But I'm not really satisfied with the grunge 005, to be honest. Let's just change this to a different directional grunge. Grunge wood. Why don't we just get this? You can just replace this. Yeah, this looks much better. And play with the balance here and contrast. Let's go back to the levels here. And play around with those values until you are really satisfied. So maybe just make this more obvious, more contrasty. It depends on what you want to have. But we should keep this close to our reference. And let's adjust the color here. Something like this maybe. Let's see. Yeah. Maybe a little less saturation. Okay, cool. Now, next thing we could do is when we check the creases here, or those edges on those planks, we could make this also a little more defined. So let's get another layer. Let's disable the autosave and we call this one dark edges maybe. Maybe just for now. Right click, add a black mask. And the black mask we want to have is right click on this black mask here and then go generator, add a generator. Click on this generator, I want to do the ambient occlusion. And you need to invert the ambient occlusion. And then you can decrease the balance. Now you can see, yeah, we should have something like this and increase the contrast. So maybe something like this. Decrease the balance a little more. Yeah, so maybe something like this. And then you can just choose any color you want. So let me disable height, metal, and normal. Roughness maybe. We should also increase this. So it's not really reflective. And base color, we should put this down. Let's give this a really dark reddish color maybe. So now you can see the difference here. something like this. So this is with ambient occlusion, and this is without. It's pretty important. And you can even make this a little stronger if you want to. Yeah, this is something we should really do. And then we could do some slight edge damage. You can see here like those tiny little spots we have here. So what we could do, let's get another layer, and we call this one edge damage. Right click, black mask, and we're gonna do right click on the black mask also, generator. Click on the generator, and we do the metal edge. So, but this is pretty generic. You can see we do have all those white lines. It's pretty generic, yeah. So what I want to do is first let's change the color. So disable metal and normal. Roughness we want to also increase by 0.85. And you could do height, a little less height if you want to. Just a tiny bit. So now you can see the difference. It's pretty strong, so let's do a little less. Just a tiny bit of height. And then let's adjust the color. So maybe something like this maybe. And then to break this, because it's just straight, you can see, we could also just get this grunge wood liquid, for example. It doesn't really matter. A nice grunge map. And you can just put this on top the metal edge. And then we need to increase this. But I believe we should get really a different grunge. Let's get this grunge maybe. Just try out different things. And let's click on the lock, because I just want to stretch this a little more. Like so. Stretch. Try to go for like a directional stretch here. And then on top of that, let's do a levels and make this a little stronger, and here also a little stronger. Like so. And then what we could do is we go to the grunge wood here and we set this to multiply. Now you can see the effect. So we are basically breaking the metal edge wear, and now have only tiny spots here. Now we have only tiny spots. And you can make this even more pronounced. Just decrease the balance on your grunge wood. Like so. And then you only have tiny spots. Just like we have here. They really have tiny spots. It's not really visible. So you can also go to metal edge wear and then decrease the grunge scale. This is pretty important. And the grunge amount. Yeah, we shouldn't really have a lot of grunge amount. Maybe like this. This is enough. And then contrast is okay, but then you can just decrease the wear level if you want. So you only have this slight damage. See, you can see it's gonna make a difference here. Let's go back to the base color. Yeah, okay, cool. So now we have that. The next thing we should do is we should have like a dirt or dust layer on top of that. But before we do this, let's go to color variation, because I believe we should make this a little more saturated, more reddish. Brighter, but don't go too crazy, otherwise it's gonna look too messy. Yeah, you really need to be careful here, otherwise it's gonna look too messy. darken. Let's just darken it without any color. Let's go back to color variation. Let's try to find a nice settle. Yeah, this one. And let's go back to plank variation here. I believe this is better. Yeah, I believe this is much better now. So you can see the artistic eye, you need to take your time and always like try to make a break, and then you can see what's missing or what's wrong. I want to do a little more edge damage, to be honest. Yeah, the levels is pretty important. Okay, cool. So yeah, we're gonna have this, and final steps we should do is we should have this dust layer and then also like a reflective layer on top. So what we're gonna do is we get another layer here and we call this one dust, or you can call this one also dirt or sand or dust. I think is something we should do. And then we do have some dust maps. Just type in dust. Why don't we just get this crunch dust white and we put this into the mask. So you can see now this is the resolution is pretty big, so we should increase this by, let's do 3. Let's disable the lock, and then we can just make this maybe a little more stretchy. But it's not really correct because dust is not, you can see here, if this is one plank and then it cuts off here, it's not really that how a dust behaves when it's just a layer on top. So instead of UV projection, we should go and have a triplanar projection. So now you can see it's basically, well, I hope, let's do planar projection, triplanar, sorry, and then let's put this back to 1 just to see how this is gonna look. So yeah, you can also go here on top right and switch this to only 2D. And then you can see that this is now being projected evenly. Let me go back to 3D. But you should understand that it's ignoring the UV islands, and it's just projecting it like it would be if it's a plane. So we don't need height, we don't need metal, we don't need normal, and roughness should be also pretty high. Let's do 0.9, and then we could do, instead of normal, we could do the subtract, maybe, or instead of subtract, we could also do the overlay. Or let's do lighten. And let's just make this like so. Just a tiny bit, like a dark gray value. Maybe this is still too much. Let me see how this is gonna look when we do subtract. No, this is not really doing stuff we really should. We should use normal or lighten. And then let's do 2 maybe. Sorry, not here. You need to click on the mask, sorry, the grunge here. And then the wrap from 1 to 2. So here, 2, which is now a little better. Let's see. Yeah, I think this is much better. And then let's do levels. No, first of all, let's do some variation. Let's do this grunge dust spread maybe. Put this on top. And let's do also 2 on wraps. No, I think this is not good. Let's do 1. And then let's do multiply. I don't change this to triplanar. I will just keep this UV. And then let's do multiply. And let's go back to the first grunge, dust white. And we could do a little more balance. Yeah. So now you can see basically what we're trying to do here. Right click here and let's do a levels just to top it off. Make this a little sharper. Disable the autosave. Just make this a tiny bit sharper. Something like this maybe. So now you do have some dust, but I'm not really satisfied. Let's do a nice tint. Something like this maybe. Nice and settle. And go back to the levels and make this sharper. Contrast. Yeah, we need more contrast. And play around with the balance here. And the first grunge, we also need more contrast. Less contrast. And I'm not really satisfied with the color, to be honest. For the dust, I think we should not have a tint. Let me see the reference again. Let's do different, let's do overlay maybe. Maybe green. Green is pretty nice. Let's make this a little darker. Like so. But I think it's too much. So let's do the screen just a little less. Like so. 50%. No tint. And change the grunge dust spread to 90. 90 rotation. And let's stretch it. Yeah, 0.3. Yeah, I believe this is fine. So now we do have some dust. Let's see the difference. Yeah. Yeah, I believe this is better. Let's go back to the blank variation. I think the color is something. Let's change the color here. And we should not have height, to be honest. Let's disable the height here. We should not have height. Yeah, this is better. And let's make this darker. Make this more subtle, to be honest. Like so. You can see you can spend a lot of time here. But I want to show you every single thing. The whole process. Okay. So what I want to do is for the wood base, we don't really have reflection here, because you can see we got rid of most of the reflections, and this is pretty good. But for the color variation we have here, let's do a little more reflection. So we can decrease this. But don't go too crazy here. Let's do 0.5 maybe. For the plank variation, we could also do a little less reflection. Just to make this more interesting. So 0.6 maybe. The dark edges, we should not have a low roughness value. We should have a higher roughness value. Also for the edge damage, this is perfectly fine. We don't really want to have... let's do 0.7 maybe. And the dust, let's do 0.95. Okay, cool. So we're getting somewhere. Now what I want to do, I want to have one additional roughness layer. So let's get another bucket. And let's do maybe how's it called? Smear? Smudge? Let's search grunge. Let's get this grunge wipe directional, and we put this into the mask. And we want to make sure that we rotate this at 90. No, not really. So we can keep it 0 and then disable the lock. And we want to make sure that we just get some more directional effect here. Just stretch this a little bit. Like so. Let's get a levels on top because we don't need so much. I think we might just want to add another grunge map. Let's get this grunge wipe direction. And then let's stretch this also. And let's multiply this. And the first grunge, we should do more balance. Maybe like so. But we don't need any color, so you can just disable color, hide, metal, and normal. We only need roughness. 0.35 maybe. We can see we do have some reflections here. But if this is not enough, we go back here and we just increase this. The second grunge, basically. Now we do have some reflective directional spots also. Point 3 we should do. Yeah. Okay, cool. And just top it off, final layer, we should use a simple color. And let's do darken. Let's try different things. This is just to make it a little more subtle and not so, how should I say, so noisy. Let's try multiply. Yeah, this is a little better. And we should go back to the plank variation here. And let's make this more obvious. And let's go inside the mask, because I want to fix this. Why is there still the grunge map 05? This is something I don't really want. Yeah, didn't we change this before? This is pretty weird. Let me get this one instead. And let's rotate this. Yeah, this is much better now. Let's go to the original grunge here inside the plank variation, and we just do more balance and more contrast. Actually, not so much. Maybe like so. And then we can go back to the final. Let's do final layer. And darken it overall. So now we're coming pretty close, I believe. Let's see the wood base here, color correct. And let's do less contrast. Maybe more. I'm just trying different things now. I believe it's pretty fine. Go to the darken channel and let's set this to maybe a subtract. Let's do the subtract 200 to see the effect here. The subtract sometimes can be quite nice. Yeah, I think this is also something which is quite cool. Color variation. Yes. Something like that. And a higher reference value maybe. Try planar projection. For the plank variation here, grunge map is better, I believe. All right. We do have the dark edges, which is pretty fine. We do have some edge damage here. But actually, I don't really want to have hide for this. Yeah, I disable the hide. Okay. And maybe a little brighter here for the edge damage. Yeah, so now it's getting a little better now here. Looks convincing now. Dust, we could actually make this a little brighter. What is this actually? Oh, the reflective layer. So this is reflective layer. Has no color, only the roughness value. Check the roughness channel. Yeah. And I think we're pretty much good to go. We don't need any color here for the final multiply layer. And this is basically it. So when we compare this, I think we have a really nice result. So what I will do now is I will just save that file and then let's go save. Save as, and let's go floor. And we just save this here as a substance painter file. And let's save this. And now what you can do is you go to File again and Export Textures. Click on your destination here, and you want to make sure that you put this into your appropriate folder. So in my case, it's just floor. We do have legacy textures, which is the fab, but we can also just go and get another folder. We call this one Final Textures. And open this one up, and we apply this folder. PBR metallic roughness, PNG, yes. Let's do a 16-bit, 4K. Infinite padding is fine. Let's click on wooden floor. We want to make sure that we have color, we have roughness, we don't need metallic, we don't need height, we don't need emissive, only the color, roughness, and the normal. And then you can export this. And this is it. So I will just save the settings here, and then File, save again. And if you just open those final textures, you can see the base color. So this is now our wood material. Here's the roughness. So the black spots are more reflective and white spots or brighter spots are less reflective. And the normal. You can see we do have some normal information here. Pretty cool stuff. Okay, so yeah, this is it. I think in the next lecture we should focus on creating the wall, and then we can slowly continue from there. So after the wall, we also want to make sure that we get either a door, or I just want to focus on a window. I want to create a window instead of having a door, and then we can also create some kind of like, how's it called? Some kind of curtain, just like in the RE9, like a nice curtain on the sides, and then inside we have this like we have this thin white curtain also. Maybe we can also animate this. This is definitely possible inside a Marvelous Designer or Blender. And yeah, but those are just effects. We can leave it for the end. And yeah, instead of using a door, we might just want to only use like a window, and we can have some nice lighting instead. This is what we can do. So yeah, let's do it.